Certainly for our table. What I'd like to do is to go around each of the tables and first of all find out what the question was, and then we'll get some feedback from what the discussion was as a result of that. So can we start with this table over here?
Yeah. Do I need the mic? Marco Biaggi from the SNP asked us about the SNP's plans are to devolve more powers down at a community level, down from the local authorities, and how might disabled people be better involved in making decisions at the local level, and what sort of structures would be needed to assist disabled people in doing that. And a lot of the discussion focused on some of the barriers that we face. In fact, consultations at the moment tend to come after the event when the decision's already been made, and that we need to be involved much earlier, and at, not only at local authority or community level, but also in decisions about services like health and social care, etc. Is there anybody who wants to add anything to what?
And it's who you're consulting with as well.
Yeah,
Both.
that's right.
One
of the points was who is consulted. Is it just those and such as those, or is it genuinely involving disabled people? And again, what are the barriers to them being involved in that? You know, some of them are financial, some of them are physical, some of them are attitudinal, some of them are informational, and all those barriers need to be addressed so that disabled people can genuinely be involved in making decisions which affect their lives at a community level.
And at the beginning of the process, at the parliamentary committees, getting people involved in the parliamentary committees, not just the same old places when we get to the parliamentary committees. People who are affected, impacted by the decisions that these parliamentary committees feed into, and politicians make based on what these committees talk about and discuss, promote, or whatever it is they don't do. That's all right, don't worry. That's what I said. Didn't say gavel.
No, didn't say gavel. No. Thank you very much. That's a really interesting question and discussion. And again, not a party political, because obviously I'm not allowed to be party political, but can you say it will be a loss to lose Marco, who has turned up at lots of different events that I've attended and answered questions openly and honestly. So thank you for that, Marco. Can I ask this table now to, this is where I wish it was 3 stone in the last 2 months. Oh, no.
Thanks. This table's candidate was Dan Heap from the Scottish Greens, and Dan asked the table about hate crime. Hate crime towards disabled people has increased significantly. The process of reporting to police has not always been a good experience for disabled people, and what can be done to improve it. We had an interesting discussion about, in particular, the issues relating to people with learning difficulties and mental health issues, and the fact that they're often not taken seriously by the police. A particular case, I won't go into the details, like a case where a person with learning difficulties had complained to the police several times about problems they were having from some youths in the area, wasn't taken seriously until the support worker took the case up on their behalf, and then they took it seriously. So often disabled people are not being treated by the police in the same way as other people are, and they're not taken seriously. So one of the issues there was about the need to improve the training of the police in order to frontline staff, both the call centres and also the police who attend incidents, so they are more aware that they should be dealing with people with disabilities in the same way as they deal with absolutely everybody else in society. We also looked at some of the other issues, the underlying issues that result in hate crime, and there's a bit of discussion about the fact that hate crime against disabled people has been increasing. It's not just about the fact that the numbers being reported are going up, which is happening. There's also that the underlying level of hate crime is also increasing, and a lot of that is to do with the many years now we've had of stigmatisation against disabled people through the media, particularly in relation to being called things like scroungers, This is not just the media though, this is politicians feeding the media.
They're sending a message. Make sure they take the DVD.
About disabled people. So I think those were the main points the table made, and Dan's response to that was that I thought it wasn't hugely surprising about the police, and that there needed to be more, not just around disability registering, but generally better training of frontline staff in the police to deal with these issues, but also that we need to push really hard about the way disability and disabled people are reported in the media and the way that other politicians treat disabled people. So, a bit of reflection there, Laura. George?
Wow, that sounds like a really good discussion. What's the deal with that deal? And also the importance of hate crime is obviously something that we're all shooting over there. Also, I think that's an excellent question. People need to find out what's going to think. So, this table, who's doing the reporting back? Yourself.
So we had Chris Chapman from the Liberal Democrats, and Chris actually came with 3 questions, so I'll just cover maybe the first 2. We had a really in-depth discussion, and the questions were related to you in part as well. So the first question Chris asked was, what's wrong with our welfare system and what do we need to do? So as you can imagine, that in itself went to a lot of discussion and debate. And we agreed that it needs to be person-centred and take a human rights-based approach. We talked about assessments for people with fluctuating conditions and how they should be done. We talked about the assessment process and the social security system taking this sort of binary approach so that people are not categorised as either capable or not capable for work. And we talked about how not everybody can do every job and have that be beneficial to their condition. Different people obviously will be interested in different types of work and need that. We talked about the ethos of the DWP and therefore the delivery mechanisms in Scotland when we get them. We had testimony from somebody at our table who has worked with DWP until very recently, that actually conditions for disabled people on staff are sometimes not very clear. We talked about the need for a smarter data sharing system, so people don't have to keep repeating against different agencies, and just more person-centred delivery mechanisms basically. And we talked a little bit about how to support people with invisible conditions, especially around employment, and the need for employers to do more to understand the barriers that people have in accessing work and staying in their job. We talked about the need for advocacy to be an area of growth in Scotland, and yeah, does that sound right?
Well, obviously the bonus point for us is 3 questions, not just 1. So, yeah, a lot of really good stuff going on at that table. Don't feel like there's any competition at this table, obviously, but you've just had 3 questions thrown at the previous table. Is it yourself that's doing the
Hello. Well, we had Kat Headley of Scottish Labour at our table, and Kat came along with the question, how far have we come in Scotland on inclusion issues, especially over the last 9 years? What's worked, what hasn't, and what's been ignored? In the conversation that we had, there was an emphasis on the need for more choice and control in people's lives and how they're going to get it. There was a feeling that there was, yes, there's a focus on personal care, but perhaps at the expense of thinking, well, it's not just personal care, there's a whole wide range of support that people need that needs to be a much bigger picture. There were comments on employment support allowance and how particularly it's almost closed in terms of being able to appeal against it. If the decision is not acceptable or doesn't work for you, then it's closed down very rapidly, and that's a considerable concern. In terms of choice and control over people's lives, there was an argument certainly around more information, but particularly some form of information hub or some way of getting more information, and that was about not just helping you with the choices that you already knew about, but the enabling, opening up ideas, possibilities of other things that you might not have thought about, to widen what you might want to do rather than limit it. There was an interesting question on people's what input disabled people had into our manifesto, the Labour Party manifesto.
Colour-coded
question as it is. And Kat's summary was that she certainly was going to focus on issues of employability and mental health.
Well, that was certainly one of the main areas that people were concerned about, in terms of what we wanted to get out of today and how people wanted to see what those experience had to say about employability and the responses to that. So, Scott, you
Yeah.
do that?
Hello, our candidate was Ian McGill, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party. He asked quite a broad, but ended up being quite a wide-ranging question about people's experience with SDS since its cross-party passage by Scottish Parliament 5 years ago. There was a discussion on how the various elements of the SDS, for example, the personal assistant element, can be very beneficial and very important. Allowing individuals to get out and do things that they couldn't previously do independently, such as going swimming, attending events like this, going out to maybe music gigs and things like that. In short, not just the serious stuff, but actually being able to have fun with life. The giving people independence that they didn't have before has been hugely positive for everyone. There was also talk about how universities are providing masses of support to students, which enables them to, in many cases, get through university better than they were able to before, and indeed actually go back and attend university, whereas before they might have been able to, in terms of their capability, but were just short having support to do so. So a lot of discussion involved around the importance of being able to live life to the fullest. There was, on the flip side, some concern that the language of local authorities and people applying for this reduces the potential pool of people who are actually eligible for support to those who are in the most dire need, and potentially excluding those with less severe but impairments but who would still benefit greatly from assistance. There was also concern that with the new systems, people are rewarded for what they can't do rather than what they can. If they're in a situation where they can do something in some days rather than not, it's a case of, well, you're not going to get support for that. This took up most of the time, so he really didn't have much an opportunity to respond, but he did ask people's feelings on the allocation of how benefits distributed, whether it's done through Holyrood or independently on a more local scale through councils, and that is where we pretty much got to.
Good, excellent. Well, that's been a really interesting set of discussions. I'm not sure how everyone, cut over the candidate crew, always good. I'm not sure how everyone else feels that went, but I think that Disability History Scotland set out with an idea to personalise and humanise these issues, and I think that's been pretty much achieved, and I hope the candidates are now more aware, in particular, of the human stories behind the questions that they quite often get asked, and when they are asked questions, can think more about the background and the reason that people do have concerns, rather than just the standard, we can't afford it, or that resources are limited, or that it's somebody else's fault and not ours. So, can I ask all the candidates now to come up to the table and take their places? And while we're doing that, can I just say two things about Disability History Scotland? Firstly, as a small organisation based in Edinburgh, we don't actually have that many resources, but one of the resources we do have is our film. And a film was made last year, and it tells the narrative about how disability rights and the human rights of people have come a long way from the please do take up a copy, and in fact take as many copies as you need. And if you want to get in contact with us and talk to us about us coming with our identity test, then please do it. Thank you for coming. We had planned to go to the pub afterwards. How shocking is that? They say not to go to the pub. That's absolutely horrific. So that's our intention. And if anyone would like to come with us, they are more than welcome. But you always have to buy your own coats. The same that you have to be able to go for. Okay. Yep, good. And close down.
Okay, ready to go?
Good to go. Yeah.
Good to go. Okay, welcome everybody to the hustings part of this afternoon's proceedings. My name's Sasha Callahan and I'm involved with Disability History Scotland. Now, before we start off, this isn't going to be like question time. I'm going to be so much nicer than David Dimbleby, just watch. We're not going to have lots of formal speeches from the candidates. What we want are the answers to the questions that you've all formulated this afternoon. We're going to just say, I know that everybody here, being a disabled person, has great manners and will not throw things or heckle. Seriously though, on a more, sort of access note, I know that there are going to be things that come up today that we're passionate about, even angry about. Please don't talk over other people, candidates and audience, because that means that if that happens, not everybody will be able to participate fairly. So that's just the one ground rule. I'm trusting the candidates not to actually physically hit each other. That's the other ground rule. But they can sort that out for themselves. Right, I'm just going to start off by reminding people that there are biographies of the candidates in your pack. So if you want to refer to them later on, that's fine. So they're not going to be giving great opening speeches, and my lovely assistant Ian at the front is going to be keeping people to time. The contributions from the candidates will be, and platform speaker who isn't a candidate, will be limited to 2 minutes, and I will observe that very, very strictly. And I think on that note, we're good to go. We'll start with a very brief introduction, and I mean brief, just tell us your name, the party you're standing for, and where you're standing if you are. And we're going to start from my right and audience from your left. So we'll start with you, Marco.
Is this going to... I'm Marco Biaggi. I'm the outgoing, I was the MSP for Edinburgh Central. I remain the Scottish Government Minister for Local Government and Community Empowerment. I'm therefore the SNP spokesperson on that, and more of a spokesperson than a candidate, but here for the SNP, and delighted to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Chapman. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for the constituency of Mid Lothian South, Tweeddale and Lauderdale, Mid Lothian and Scottish borders, and I'm also a regional candidate for the south of Scotland.
Thank you. My name is Dan Heap from the Scottish Green Party, and I'm a regional candidate for the Lothian electoral region.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Kat Headley. I'm the Scottish Labour candidate in Edinburgh Western and also a regional candidate.
Okay, thank you everybody.
And
Do you know that was a Freudian slip.
I'm not taking it personally, Sasha. Sasha's heard me speak before though, so that's probably an indication.
Keep going, Ian.
But I'm Ian McGill, I'm the Conservative candidate in Edinburgh Northern and Leith, and also on the Lothians list.
Okay, apologies to Ian, I would never miss him out intentionally. Right, what we're going to do is to move into the question session now. I'm going to go first of all with the table that talked about transport. If you ask your questions, the candidates will come back and then you will come back, I hope, from your table with the answer that you would have liked to have heard from the candidates. So we're going to start off with transport question, please, and through the mic if you can.
Oh, right, well, I need to take it. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Run, Nick.
Which is transport table? Okay, and who is asking the question? Seamless.
I don't think.
Our question is, concessionary fares and passenger assist are intended to give disabled people the same opportunities to travel as anyone else. But these are restricted because, for example, you can't use the bus pass on night buses and you have to pre-book passenger assist. What will you do to make sure disabled people have the same choices to travel when and where they want as anyone else?
Okay, thank you. Marco, we'll start with you.
Are these going to pick up without being moved
I
around?
think you probably will need to move it a little bit. Or use the handheld, Mark, whichever the one's easier for you.
I think that picks it up as long as it's pointing in the right direction, doesn't it? Yes, okay. What will we do? We are absolutely committed for a start to protecting the concessionary fare scheme, which is something that has come under some political criticism in recent years. It's not always been a given in Parliament that continuation of the concessionary fare scheme as it currently is and what it currently offers was going to happen. So we are totally behind that. We will be reviewing again what the eligibility is. I think there are issues there. The intention is to maintain it for all local and Scottish-based long-distance bus services, and if there are some that aren't being caught within that, then that is definitely something we need to deal with. On the more community-based transport approach, it's been very hard to work that into the concessionary fare scheme in the past, but one of the things that the Community Empowerment Act will allow is any local group that is running transport on a community basis will have a whole series of new ways of accessing funding for that within the local area from all kinds of partners, whether the local government or the health board or the community planning partnership. And that is probably the better way of making sure that those services, which are lifeline services, which are needed to ensure just basic equality of access, will create new opportunities to ensure that they are funded and able to operate. So that would be our way forward on it.
Okay, thank you, Marco. Right, Chris.
Representing or hoping to represent a rural constituency in rural areas such as the Scottish Borders, the first challenge is to find the bus that can then actually allow you on, that has the right access to get on board the bus, and then hopefully it gets you to the destination in a reasonably and timely manner. So that's challenge one. But hopefully, if you're able to do that, I'd like to certainly see the concessionary rate maintained, if not improved, and the restrictions lifted. I was having a conversation with RNIB, the Royal National Institute for the Blind, and the discrepancy even between local authorities on who can get the support, carer support to take those with visual impairments. And I think that's a real problem in itself, is that we've got people that can go by bus to Edinburgh from the Scottish Borders using their carer allowance on the bus, but can't use the train. And yet the train is more efficient, faster, and easily more accessible. And I think that's kind of morally wrong in a lot of ways. So therefore, I think these challenges need to be overcome. I think you probably find that there's cross-party consensus on much of this issue. Is that it's not a political issue. It's something that I think is just an issue, and it needs to be addressed. And the Parliament has the power and capability of doing it. What we need to do is identify. And I think such a forum as this is fantastic, is identify where these discrepancies are happening and come together, make it aware to the Scottish Parliament and the relevant ministers and committees, and feeding in, as rightly said on one of the tables, making sure that that opportunity to feed in the committees is there. And then we can tackle those issues, as simple as that. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Dan?
Thanks. I very much agree with Chris, and when he said I would doubt there's much between the 5 candidates and the 5 parties here. I think first I'll pick up with something Chris said on just the number of buses and the accessibility, making sure there's enough rural transport in the first place, particularly in rural and the outer areas of cities where transport and particularly bus transport isn't as available as it should be. With the Scottish Greens in the south of Scotland have had a campaign called Hold the Bus. And that's about making sure that there is enough transport in the first place for everyone, which is not the case in some areas of Scotland. Regarding the concessionary fares scheme, I very much agree that we do need to look at how consistent that is and making sure that there is consistency across the country in terms of the times and who can access that. And it does seem entirely unreasonable that there's certain times of the day that disabled people can't use their concessionary fares pass. But I very much agree that I think this is something we can probably all work on together in the next Parliament.
Okay, thanks Dan. Kat?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree that in relation to the cross-party consensus in relation to a lot of these issues, I would, however, say that I'm sure that that's probably what you hear all the time, is that whenever people talk to you or you ask them questions, is that you generally get a lot of people saying, yes, we all agree on these issues, but it's probably more about action. And I genuinely can't understand why you wouldn't be able to use your concessionary card on a nighttime bus. Apart from, I mean, that must surely come from the transport operators. Scottish Labour's going into this election talking about having a transport smart card that will work across the whole of Scotland. We want to review how transport is delivered in this country in order to break down these kind of regional differences. And also to try and address some of the corporate control that there is over the delivery of transport. So I think that in terms of once we open that up and try and start to look at it as a kind of one country approach, but also looking at individual groups who need to be specifically, their needs need to be specifically looked at, I think that there's a lot of scope for groups like yourselves to come and speak to me or other people in the party to say this is what's important and this is what needs to change. And that's why I think that events like this, and particularly this format of, and I didn't get, if I'd had opening remarks, I would have said it, but I'm going to use up my last, I think I've got more than 30 seconds left, and just say that this format for engaging with politicians, I don't really feel like I am a politician unless I'm elected, but I guess that I am because I'm standing up here or sitting up here, is really good. This is hugely innovative, and I think that if I ever speak to anyone else, I'll be going on Twitter afterwards and saying this is a format that needs to work, it needs to be replicated across a number of different industry groups. I really applaud you for doing this because this is the most beneficial kind of engagement that I've had from my hustings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kat. And last but definitely not least, Ian.
Sasha, thank you. Not going to repeat, the Conservatives were committed to extending the concessionary travel, we're committed in the manifesto to extending the concessionary travel and ensuring that it's on to likes of community transport and all, but there is this cross-party consensus there, so make sure you remind us all of that after the election. I'm going to urge you all a little bit with my Leaf hat on, so I'm representing Edinburgh Northern and Leaf, just something that's coming up, something that will come up the election after this, because in Scotland we're not short of elections, and we're not. The council election is going to be next year. Something that's going to come up in that is the trams, so we have a lot of strong opinions about the trams, but certainly my personal view, which comes from my background working with people with physical disabilities, folks with visual sport needs. When the tram comes along, you're not queuing up, there's not a discussion between the mothers with prams and folks with wheelchairs as to who can get on that tram and who needs to wait another 15 minutes in the rain, and I'd just be encouraging you and urging you, just make your voices heard when that discussion's coming up, because it's a massive issue facing this next council. Do we extend it or do we not? You've got a really strong, compelling case there for getting just trams around, and that makes a difference. So if we're talking about transformational stuff, that's certainly one of them. So just be prepared to make your voices heard, because there'll be calls from the other side. So it is. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ian, and thank you for very comprehensive but concise answers, and everyone keeping to time. That's wonderful. If we can have the question from the transport table, your ideal answer. Run, Nick.
Next never ran in his life.
You can't see how many trip hazards and safety.
Spoken like a council.
I'll think the table would welcome the fact that there apparently is a cross-party consensus that we should improve the concessionary transport scheme to make it better for disabled people. But I'd be interested to know how they're actually going to do that, because there's plenty of opportunity for several years and nothing much has changed. The question which wasn't answered was about things like passenger assist and the fact that people using the trains, disabled people using the trains, have to pre-book. And why haven't we actually doing more to ensure that trains are more accessible for disabled people who just have to turn up and want to use them?
Well, so we'll go around this way because it's easier.
It's a light jog there.
I was wrong.
He does run. Right. Okay. There may be an opportunity, dependent on how we get through this first tranche of questions, to come back and press the candidates a little bit more. But let's see how we go on this. Now we're going to move on to the social care table, which is this one right at the front.
And who is our lovely social care questioner?
Hello, Sasha. Our question is, what is the relationship between social care and human rights, and how do your party's policies reflect this? If social care is a human right, how can you justify charging recipients for social care?
Okay, that's great. Everybody okay? Ready to go? Okay, we'll start with you, Chris.
I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what the party policy is, in terms, particularly around the human rights element of it. I'll just go from my personal experience as a youth worker. I do a lot of cross work with social carers, and I think they play a fundamental role within our local authorities in providing a lot of support out there, and I'd like to see that increased. I think if that was ever removed or barriers were put up, particularly around costs, I think the implications to so many people across our communities would be irreversible, and the damage would just be immense, contributing to further down the line impacts from mental health and well-being issues, to say the least. So my own personal opinion, having kind of worked around the field and supported the field in my youth working capacity, is that I think it'd be absolutely devastating to see charges put in place for social care. I think that would really put up barriers to the people that need it most, from a most disadvantaged backgrounds, and again from a rural community. If you take that lifeline away, you're going to have people stuck in their homes potentially and not getting out, not seeking the support, not even be able to engage the opportunities, even though I think there's too fewer opportunities as it is. So it is a lifeline, and so in that sense I would perceive it as a human right in that regard. I think it provides so much to allow individuals to engage their community, and removing that would be just abhorrent, really, and I'd be devastated for that. So I'd certainly be campaigning in the Parliament, if elected, to maintain and increase social work support to encourage everybody to be able to access more opportunities in the constituencies. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Dan.
To just take those two issues very quickly at the start, the link between human rights and care, I think Chris laid out very clearly, is that the provision of good quality care in the right amounts can absolutely transform people's lives who need care, and open up and offer the opportunities in life that everyone deserves, and different groups of people do need different support to do that, and care is an important aspect of that for disabled people. To go on to that, I entirely agree that if care is a human right, then to charge for care is absolutely not acceptable. And you may hopefully have already read the Scottish Green Party manifesto. We have 6 core policy targets, and improving the experience of care and carers is one of those 6, and we've been talking about that again and again and again during this campaign. We want to see, for example, a living wage plus of £9 for carers, to ensure that carers can that we keep recruiting carers, and we make sure that's an adequate supply of carers to do care work. And we also want to increase the carers allowance, I think, more than any other party, but certainly significantly, £93 a week. In terms of the care charging for care. Part of the problem is the immense pressure on local authority budgets, which has been, I'll try and keep the partisanship to a minimum, but has been a problem in recent years because of the council tax freeze. And we want to transform the power of local authorities to raise more tax if necessary, to pay for better care, for more care, and for them not to have to introduce charges for care.
Okay, thanks Dan. Kat?
I would echo actually quite a lot of what's been said, although one thing I can say is that Scottish Labour will be launching its specific disabilities and inclusion manifesto today, having launched, was that only yesterday? I can't remember what day it was. All of my days are blending into one long leaflet run or event on various hustings. But we launched our manifesto this week, and we are specifically launching our Disabilities and Inclusion Manifesto today. One of the things that talks about in that is to conduct a complete review of the delivery of social care in Scotland. And part of that review could be to discuss how human rights more meaningfully work within the social care system, and how those who are in the social care system, either as recipients and carers and various other people, how they feel that their human rights are being affected. So I would certainly urge that these issues, we need to look at how the delivery in Scotland works, and particularly in relation to cost. I think I would echo again what was just been said by Dan in relation to the pressure that has been on local authority funding. Scottish Labour wants to, going into this election, talk about using the powers in order to avoid a lot of these cuts, in order to invest in our public services. And so there's a wide amount of agreement there, and there's a lot that can be done, but it's going to take the political will in order to do it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Kat. Ian?
Yeah, you guys are my favourite table because we had a great conversation earlier. Yes, it's a human right. Where should be pleased to hear that, but you might not be pleased to hear as I'm going to say that there are some people who are well able to contribute, and some people who are well able to contribute should, because that increases the pot for folks who are not. But my day-to-day, and here's my big frustration with it. So in my day-to-day job, there are people that we work with, that we support, and the contributions they make don't reflect their income or their circumstances. It's getting to the bottom of how and why. Now we do things through City of Edinburgh Council, getting to the how and why social worker making decisions about how one person contributes against another. There's no rhyme nor reason to that. They will not explain it. We don't understand the algorithms there, and it is a big part of my day-to-day job is fighting the council and making sure just with some of the unfair charges that don't stack up and cost folk the support there.
Okay, thanks, Ian. What was your ideal answer? Oh, I'm sorry, Marco. Do you know, it's obvious. Obviously, I have a problem with people sitting at either end of the table. So thank you for reminding me that you're definitely there, Marco.
I'll spare any jokes about being on the extreme left, the extreme right. Especially since it's different ways around, depending on the perspective. One person's extreme left, another extreme right. Right, on this, I think the first thing to say is to recognise what has actually happened in the Scottish Parliament on the whole area in the last term. We've had self-directed support, yes, that came in embedding a rights approach, but in pure financial terms, the Independent Living Fund removal was plugged, it was replaced, it was saved in Scotland. And similarly, the Scottish Welfare Fund was not being hit by the same reductions south of the border because additional resource was found here. And we do, as a government, have to defend the principle of universalism on 100 fronts, but that's because our heart lies in universalism rather than means testing, and wherever it's possible to do, wherever we've been able to extend that, we have. And we've taken a lot of flack for that, but that is the principle that we seek to uphold wherever we physically can. The manifesto proposals that we're putting forward, if we get back in, that we would consult on national guidance on the care issue, in the first instance proposing a national cap on charges. We also want to review care more generally, get rid of the time and task approach, focus more to outcomes actually delivering for people rather than checklist approaches to care. There's a lot that needs to happen. I think we all, again, will agree on the need to review and improve it, but I hope that our record in straining every sinew to try and protect the schemes that we have while extending them is something that can give you confidence about what would happen if the SNP were re-elected.
Okay, thanks Marco. Thank you everyone for your answers. Right, going back to Ian's favourite table, social care. What was your ideal scenario in answer to that question?
First of all, thank you all for your answers. We absolutely agree that social care is a human right. Our thinking mainly focused around on how to avoid the implementation of charges. We do agree that there should be some kind of system in place where people contribute financially according to their need. This is called taxation, and already takes place. To avoid what would effectively be a second charge for people who do need social care, we suggested the elimination of loopholes and tax avoidance measures to increase the tax take, with the proceeds to be redirected to ring-fenced health and social care provision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Right, it's a bit like a relay race with us swapping over microphones here. Okay, we're going to now move on to the table that discussed employment issues. Okay, sorry, am I making you run? Well,
That's
never
fine.
mind. There you go.
I have advanced knowledge. Ashley is going to be asking a question from the employability table. Here we go.
So, yeah, we will employability of a sort of got this people different needs from the table. So, a question would be, what do you think are the top seriously barriers to people with disabilities getting into it, and what should the government be doing about that?
Okay.
That's a big question, so I'll walk very slowly back to the table to give, I think it'll be Dan who's scribbling away.
It
What
is.
it feels like to be the first one to get the question.
Okay, you ready to go, Dan?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. So I believe it was what are the top two priorities for helping disabled people into employment. I confess I'm not a huge fan as a lefty academic of this phrase employability, because it puts so much onus on the individual rather than the employer and on society, and that's the general approach of the Scottish Greens as well. That needs to be much more support to help people get into work and to break down the barriers and not just making them more employable. So suggest it's actually not the fault of employability per se, it's about accessibility of work and attitudes of employers. Certainly we called during the Smith Commission to devolve and expand the Access to Work scheme, which unfortunately that didn't go forward, but we would like to see a lot more efforts on the part of employers to make places of employment and employment practices more accessible. And in terms of help, and certainly we would like to see improved for support that disabled people do need to move towards work. We want to certainly improve that. Those powers are being devolved to the Scottish Parliament, unfortunately with a pretty hefty budget cut from the Westminster government, and the Scottish Greens would look to try to plug some of that gap. Work choice, which as employment schemes go, has been remarkably successful. Would like to see that that's a voluntary scheme all schemes to for people to go to work, in my view and in view of the Scottish Greens, should be voluntary. Would certainly like to see something like work choice continue, because it has been very, very successful. But there is a question there of how we plug that gap and how we continue to provide that support that is under attack because of budget cuts.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Kat.
Well, this is my favourite table because it was mine. But we also talked a lot about employability because, or accessing work, because this is where I think for me this personally is really important, because I'm a solicitor in my day job. I work for a firm called Digby Brown, and I deal a lot with, well, I deal entirely with people who have had accidents. Now, a lot of these people have had life-changing accidents, people who were entirely fit before and then are suddenly very not, and they have to adjust to that, both in terms of their life, their mental health, their relationships, their family, and also very specifically work, and how that how their employers or former employers treat them, how future employers might treat them, and whether or not they're even going to have access to that is a hugely important thing to them, and a really important part of the work that I do. I think that we need, in terms of the two things, the greatest barriers, I think that there are the perceived barriers and then actual barriers. I think that we were talking at our table about whether or not people with disabilities which may not be visible may in fact want to even tick the box that says that they have a disability, in the fear that they may be discriminated against by a potential employer. That in itself speaks volumes of our society and how much is still to do and how far we still have to go. I think that greater understanding as individuals, not just from employers, but people within the workplace, colleagues, how they treat their fellow workers in relation to the issues of access and someone who has challenges in their life and how they fit into a workplace. And that, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. And we want to, and talking about the binary issue, there was someone at one of the tables talked about the binary of that you either physically, you either well or you're not. For a lot of people with disabilities, there is, it is one day is okay and one day is not, and making employers a lot more flexible in terms of being able to accommodate those needs, I think is a huge issue.
Okay. Thanks, Kat. Right on the button. Ian.
Yeah, 5 seconds for your loss of train of thought.
You've just lost my train of thought. One of the reasons the Conservatives are doing so well in the polls just now is just the strong message that we're putting out about holding the SNP government to account. Goes back to the fear from the transport table that everyone says the right thing about transport, but you've got a doubt in your mind that the SNP government, and make no mistake, they're going to win a majority and be back next year. You've got a fear in your mind, a doubt that they'll actually deliver on what they're saying. One of the big gaps to folks returning to work has come. SNP have lost 152,000 college places, a lot of them flexible, a lot of them disadvantaging folks who are returning to work, folks who are 25, women, folks who've got additional support needs of whatever variety they are. They've not been held to account for that properly, but I would say skills is one of the blockages there, which is why we're very big in the Conservatives about getting those college places, flexible learning, getting apprenticeships, getting vocational skills academies, 10 of them up and down the country, and it is. So skills is one of them. Believe me, with SNP, cutting the college places, cutting flexible learning, having a presumption towards academia as opposed to vocational training, that is a massive, massive block. But the second biggest barrier that I would see in my day-to-day is the perception and a perception within employers and that's real, it's out there, and that's a massive task for us all to be challenging and addressing.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I won't forget you this time, Marco.
I have to respond to that. The abusive statistics that continually happens from the Conservatives on the college places. There was a difficult decision taken to focus on full-time education at the time of the recession. The actual full-time equivalent places in Scotland's colleges has stayed constant. There's been a shift within that, but that is very different to cutting places. And I think talking about access to any kind of tertiary education from a party, the only party that's in this election that wants to make university for those and such as those is really pretty rich. No pun intended. The two priorities, I would say, I would like the UK government to reverse the 87% cut in the funding that they attached to Work Choices and Work Programme when they devolved it. We thought we were going to be able to do something different. We were given the ability to do something different, but none of the money to do it with. That is a real problem. And if we had the resources that had been being spent before, then we would be able to produce a materially different scheme in Scotland. We found £20 million extra from other budgets, as we have been doing time after time when the Tories have cut things, but this should be something that the UK government should be stepping up on. And the other thing, I suppose I would agree with everything that's been said about the wider attitudes, the workplace changes. One thing that could be done, again, by the UK government on that would be to re-resource the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which has been drastically cut by the UK government, which has a brilliant capacity, if it was properly resourced, for targeted litigation, for awareness, education raising, and just general workplace help on a one-to-one basis through advice and assistance. That would be quite a tangible thing that would help and would be another Tory cut I would love to see reversed by this UK government.
You are aware, Marco, that you have the powers to reverse any cut you want, because tax-varying powers, Labour, Greens and Lib Dems are all proposing to use them, and you're not.
Whoa.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry.
That's okay. A little bit of controversy here. Now, it's great to have that, but we're just going to do this through the chair. That's okay, guys? Right.
Can I very briefly respond? Since he took extra time.
Since he did. Go on then.
When we proposed council tax changes that were going to put up by £500 per house at the top end of the spectrum, the Conservative Party, or their cheerleaders, the Daily Mail, called it the middle class tax rage. You know, we are not afraid of putting up taxes on those that can afford to pay. We're doing it, and they're attacking us for it. So this seems very inconsistent from Ian McGill.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Chris?
There is no one-size-fits-all answer to this. I think that's quite important to identify, is that the diversity of disabilities and how it affects each individual is exactly that. So what might work for one person in seeking employment and therefore gaining employment, or actually just any opportunity, whether that's voluntary, whether that's part-time work, whether that's further education, higher education, modern apprenticeships, it will be unique. However, in one of the conversations I was really pleased that
produce that, as it were, with people who use those services.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, all of you, for very, very concise answers. We can just have the health table, if you'd like to just tell us what your ideal answer would have been.
Yes, our ideal answer, I think, would have been to understand the barriers to co-production for disabled people, including people with mental health, and to make demonstrate a willingness to reach out to those particular communities rather than just open doors and expect people who are already using their capacity to live their everyday lives to reach out to them and bring them in, rather than just opening the door and saying, come if you can.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. And last of all, the table that was discussing social security.
I thought it might be that.
Well, for your information, I've been press ganged into this. I was going to be doing this. However, I'm going to be doing it. And as you know, social security is quite a wide-ranging subject, and the development of that is quite wide-ranging. And also, social security actually touches on all of the subjects that we've spoken about so far. We have decided to condense it, however, and we've condensed it in relation to DLA, Disabled Living Allowance, and Personal Independence Payment. And there's three parts to that question, really.
Well, how does Matt? We may not be able to take three parts. So do you want to quickly?
I'll quickly go over them and then just let whoever stays, whoever, whatever. This is a comedy. The first part of the question relates to when and how would you hope, or would you start using the new powers in relation to particularly in relation to PIP and DLA. The second bit is in relation to those people that have already been assessed, both the new cases and the long-term cases. Some of them have been knocked off. What are you going to do about that? And then the third thing is about, and your subject really. Oh yeah, I'm looking at you. As the bringing things down to a cost factor is not good enough. What we should be looking at is entitlement rather than how much will it cost to implement this. So how would you approach that, essentially?
Thanks, Matt. We're going to start with Kat.
In relation to when and how, as fast as possible, and in relation to I think this is probably for a broad answer for all three of the questions, which is we want to review, basically, at the time of when we get the powers, we want to review the entire system as to how we're going to make it work in Scotland and involve people who are disabled in that process so that we can discuss about what has worked to make it better, because if the powers are there in order for us to have a specific way of doing it and hopefully a better way of doing it. So we need to learn from the experience of how it has worked at a reserved level so that we can improve it when we take it to a devolved level.
Okay, thank you very much, Kat. Ian?
Yep, and it is please do recognise just the opportunities provided by the devolved powers. I'm excited to see answers from the rest of the panel because blaming UK governments is no longer acceptable when these powers are here. With DLA, PIP and attendance allowance, we're keen to see that within the integration of health and social care, so looking at DLA, attendance allowance, PIP being part of that integrated system, devolving control of that local authorities and health boards or to the new health and social care partnerships with those specific disabilities. That's what our proposal is. And day-to-day, doing things on the cost factor isn't good enough. Back to my, where SDS was self-directed support with the new living wage coming in across the country, it's amazing. Up and down the country, folks, SDS packages were cut, obviously within a financial decision, but it's not within the law to do. So.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Right, I'm just going to be democratic here quickly. Dan, we'll go with you.
Okay, thanks. The Scottish Greens believe the devolution of some powers over social security offers us in Scotland a huge opportunity to map a different course to the one that has been mapped for us, Chris, by previous UK governments. The DLA PIP reforms, amongst reforms as well to ESA, have been done not with the consultation and co-prediction from disabled people, and they've been absolutely ruinous. And there is an opportunity to map a different course. To answer the first question, we would start to do that straight away. We think there's because of how I've outlined just now about what's going on, I think there's an opportunity to start all over again with the social security system. That's why we would want a social security commission, but we can't wait until that report. So we'd have some interim changes to DLA. One of the first ones would be automatic granting of PIP, and then it would be reviewed in retrospect rather than making people wait often a long time. And also we will want to get rid of repeat assessments for degenerative and long-term conditions where the condition is unlikely to get better. And we also want to make that process of reassessment a much more dignified process, and try to do that, for example, through the telephone and through post, rather than hauling people in, often into accessible offices to be humiliated, which is what's happened in the past couple of years. So there is an extraordinary opportunity to do things differently, and that's what the Scottish Greens want to do.
Okay. Oh, right, Chris.
So to echo that, we would like to use this opportunity to do things differently. The Scottish Liberal Democrats see the next 5 years to build up a Scottish welfare system that has cross-party consensus, that sees a welfare system that underpins the respect for the dignity of the individual, and actually, rather than what is current, which is, as rightly said, is currently based around economics and a can't-do service rather than a can-do service. I'd like to see that changed, and I certainly advocate that if elected. We believe that these changes would then support individuals to make sure that they get the right service. However, I don't want to just see a quick fix, get in, use the new powers straight away and get it wrong. This does need a proper engagement process with cross-party consensus, but most importantly, direct engagement from groups such as yourself to actually make sure that the system is fit for purpose, which I believe the current system is not. And I think you're a valuable asset to do that. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Nice to be a valuable asset. Marco.
Well, I'm glad that everybody supports the engagement with the community here. It's something that the Scottish Government has been doing. We've engaged with 100 organisations on the design of social security for when the powers come in, and we have already taken things from that. We've taken from that the need for a wholly new agency in Scotland, rather than, for example, trying to pay the DWP to do things differently, which I don't think is on anybody's wish list at the moment. The issue for assessment being a particular one, to introduce long-term awards where appropriate based on conditions. That's something that's in our manifesto that we will do because we've listened, and to set up a disability benefits assessment commission that will co-produce this sort of work with disabled people. It is important that we talk about respect here. That is at the heart of what we want to do, because that's what we've heard. Mm-hmm. We need to get to a place where the them and us thinking that is being spread around by various people for political advantage is gone. I have a disabled father, I have a disabled nephew. Most people have friends and relatives that are disabled, even if they are not themselves. It shouldn't have to be about connections like that, but those are very strong. But I want to get to a place where everybody is seen as having the intrinsic worth on the basis of being human beings, and are treated that way by the social security system. And the sooner we can get to that, and the sooner we get not just the 11 powers that are coming, but all the rest over welfare, so we can run it across the entire social security system, frankly, the better.
Right, thank you, Marco. Right, Matt, if you'd just like to come back briefly with your ideal answer from your table.
And
I will rush up very quickly. So
No.
I was saving you a run there, but there we go. The ideal answer is probably with the powers at the moment. However, it is the ideal answer, and the ideal answer is what would you say again? An income? Yes, a citizen's income. It's great to hear such positive inputs from the panel. Let's see how those positive inputs turn into realities. Thanks.
And a citizen's income, for those that aren't aware, is a set sum of money which would be given to every citizen.
Okay. Thank you for that input, Nick. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much to the panel for their answers, which may or may not have been comprehensive enough for everybody here, but I hope that when we go to the ballot box next week, we have a little bit more of an idea about who we want to vote for and the policies of each of the parties. And thank you very much to the audience. You actually did very much of the work for this afternoon. Before we finish, I'm just going to hand back over to George and Phil, who have got some closing remarks.
Thank you, Sasha. So yes, my closing remarks are really just to say that this has been a learning experience, certainly for Disability History Scotland. I'm sure Inclusion Scotland too are pleased to have an example that they might be able to replicate elsewhere as a different way to engage and a different type of engagement. May not be co-production, but certainly co-production from ourselves, DHS and Inclusion Scotland, has led to what I think has been an immensely enjoyable and quite informative afternoon. Again, like Sasha said, I think the main work has been done by you guys, all sitting around the table and all being very chatty and coming up with some fantastic ideas. And I think you should all feel that you have assisted each other in trying to identify what your intentions are and how you intend to vote. Again, like Sasha, I'd like to thank the panel and my personal thanks to Phil, who, despite wearing a green shirt,
honestly didn't plan that.
Has to go down as one of the best production experiences we've had, and for Disability History Scotland, thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
Thanks very much. And yeah, sorry, I really didn't plan the shirt. This was the last green one. I promise. I'd just like to say, I add my own thanks to the panel and to Sasha for chairing. You've all done really well. It's been a really interesting question time session. But as George says, the real stars of the show have to be yourselves, the participants. I've been bowled over at the level of enthusiasm and engagement that you've all put into this event. I'm absolutely delighted with how it's gone. We really were setting out to try and set a benchmark and throw down the gauntlet for parties, showing this is how you can be more accessible, this is how you can involve disabled people better in politics. This event has been live broadcast to YouTube so that people who weren't able to be here for whatever reason could watch. As you can see, we've captioned the question time part of the event. These captions will be turned into subtitles and will be added to the video later so that people who couldn't attend at this time will be able to watch it back later and hopefully find it fully accessible. The co-production aspect of this has been great, and we've heard from our candidates here today how welcome that's been to them. So it sounds like we've got an open door invitation from all the main political parties, and I'm sure the others in Scotland as well. Disabled people are welcome in politics. We're here to help you do it if you need support, but we're relying on you as well to help us to develop the means to do it. So thank you very much for taking part. Monitoring forms are coming round. We'd be really appreciative if you could fill those in. And there are also event evaluation forms we'd like you to complete as well. If you need any assistance to complete those, please just ask. If anyone has travel expenses that they haven't yet spoken to, in particular Janice at the back of the room with the high-vis vest, you can sort those out before you go, or if you prefer, you can get in touch with us by email and we can sort it out after the event. Thanks very much. That's us finished.
Thank you very much. You don't miss me on this side now?
Oh, I'm sure I'll be there again someday. Thanks so much, Sasha.
That's okay, no worries.
A really fantastic event. I'm really impressed.
Good. Well, thank you for
Sasha,
coming.
well done. Thank you.
That's okay. My pleasure. It was.
Don't know if I'll see you next year again.
Oh my God, it may be.
Good job.
No, I genuinely, as a format for engagement, this has certainly been the most, I think, beneficial and worthwhile and meaningful.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's great, because we could have just done the traditional.
Yeah, but that's just it. You end up just having the Baron. Thank you very much. And just expressing again how impressed I am with this format in terms of actually meaningful engagement and discussion about the issues rather than just the 2 hours of back and forth.
It's a format that means.
Thank you very much for those of you participating online. I hope that you found the live stream to be interesting and accessible. Thanks for joining us.
So